academician, an adventurer, an aviator, a record holder. The multi-dimensional Rudy began his career as a student leader in Punjab University, and he achieved many heights under the guidance of Sri Chandrasekharji. His political career began in 1990 when he was elected as the youngest member of the Bihar Legislative Assembly. In 1996, he became a member of parliament when he was elected to Lok Sabha from Chhapra, Bihar, and was re-elected in the year 1999 to serve the people yet once again. He has served as the Minister of the State for Commerce, Trade and Industry and triggered major reforms in civil aviation sector.
देश में प्रतिस्पर्धा होना चाहिए और लोगों के पास अपॉर्चुनिटी होना चाहिए कि और भी विमान कंपनियां इस देश में आ सकें.
In 2008, he became the spokesperson of BJP. As Secretary of the Constitution Club of India, he brought a complete turnaround, making it more efficient. Currently, he is the Minister for Skill Development and Entrepreneurship in the Union Government. Under his leadership, skill development has become one of the major focus areas for the country. And for the first time ever, a robust policy framework for skill development in India has been created.
आज हमारा सौभाग्य है कि देश का सबसे बड़ा स्किल का आयोजन आज वर्ल्ड स्किल डे पर भारत में माननीय प्रधानमंत्री द्वारा किया जा रहा है.
With Rudy's leadership, Skill India has launched its flagship program, PMKVY.
आने वाले दशकों में विश्व को सबसे ज्यादा वर्कफोर्स अगर कहीं से मिलेगा तो हिंदुस्तान से मिलेगा.
NSDC's training capacity has expanded to include several training partners.
देश में पहली बार वर्ल्ड स्किल्स कंपटीशन की तैयारी हो और इस बार देश के राष्ट्रपति जी उस कार्यक्रम का उद्घाटन कर रहे हैं.
And MOUs have been agreed upon with other ministries to boost skills in India. Let's welcome on stage the man with many skills, Shri Rajiv Pratap Rudy.
We are indeed honored to invite you, sir, for your inaugural address.
Good afternoon, Namaskar. Mr. Bruce Leslie, Chancellor, Alamo College, Texas, USA. Mr. Kwatuso, the Deputy Director General of JICA. My Honorable and esteemed Minister, Mr. Dilip Kumar Thakore, the Honorable Minister for Labour and Employment. Shri Jayanti Bhai Kardiu, Minister for Honorable Minister present in the audience. Manish Kumar, the CEO of the National Skill Development Corporation. Poonam Bhai, the Parliamentary Secretary in the Labour Department. Mr. Rajiv Gupta, the Secretary of Labour and Employment. Distinguished guests and friends from media and other people. Well, I was actually listening very intently all the aspects right from the state to what Mr. Leslie had to speak. And when I'm with this august audience, I was just wondering where to start, because when we talk about ecosystem for skills, it is something which is talked about, understood, explained, but when it comes to the practical part of it, there are many gaps in between. I must thank the Honorable Chief Minister of Gujarat. He wrote and asked us to be present here to partner this event. A very special thanks to him and his government and his officers who have organized this entire show, especially to Mr. Bharat Lal and his team who coordinated from Delhi and other persons. Also the state government. But the one person who deserves to be applauded for what is happening in the skill sector is a person who had a probation and understanding of skills in the state of Gujarat. And at the Government of India, there was nothing called the Skills Ministry or Skills or Entrepreneurship. And this vision came all the way from Gujarat right up to the Prime Minister's chair in Delhi, and the ministry was created as a sole thought process of the Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi. And this audience, for the first time, if there is an audience in any event to discuss skills, it's because the Prime Minister, and when he was talking to me, said to create this ministry. And the actual startup ministry in Government of India, not at the state, actual startup ministry in Government of India is the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. And I'm proud that this responsibility has been given to me. But I must thank the Prime Minister to begin with it. But I am slightly cryptic and slightly acerbic when I take up the issue of skill, because I was hearing a gentleman here, Mr. Bruce Leslie. People would occasionally call it Bruce Lee, and Bruce Leslie, it's easier to remember. So I was hearing him very intently. And then when I heard him, I felt very sad about it. Do you know the reason why? World over, like the last 69 years, when you talk about skills, it's all thought about education. But we in India, post-independence, when we talk about skills, we only talk about education. And the policy makers, ever since India got independence, and in this government and the previous governments maybe 30 years ago, we would call the education called the Ministry of Education. And at some point of time, from Ministry of Education, it became the Ministry of Human Resources Development. And I presume when it was called the Ministry of Human Resources Development, skills was brought into it as a human resource which is required. But somehow the people who in the system became very important, I would not comment on this dais, but most of the dais and most of the people in the audience and most of the people who ran the system in last 69 years were not skilled, but they were all educated. And education, for some reason, when we wanted to pull skills along with education, education had a distinct bias against skills. Now, it's a very strong statement which I'm making. But skills, because all who became important in the system, they're all educated people. They wanted to hold degrees and wanted to attend convocations. And if I have to draw a line back and to say why I can establish this point, is just a small reference. We have heard only about, we didn't talk about engineering colleges on the stage. We only talked about the ITIs. And if we want to do this with the ITIs, we want to make them the center of excellence. They are the backbone for all excellent manufacturing and so forth and so on. But did this country realize in last 69 years that those 2.3 million students who pass out from the ITIs, in last 69 years, an 8th dropout or the 8th pass who would do 2 years of ITI and 10th, he would never have an equivalence of a matriculation of a matriculation certification. A boy who joined after matriculation, an ITI for 2 years course, would not be recognized with a certificate for a +2 equivalent so that he could migrate up. Imagine, for 69 years, all those who went to the ITI structure never were qualified to move further. How can you run a system when the aspiration of a child is killed because he knows that if you do ITI, your prospects for future education is closed forever? And on the directions of the Prime Minister, for the first time, for all these ITI students, 2.3 million students, we have opened a small bridge course exam to make them equivalent for qualification of matriculation and higher secondary for the first. And we are not going to stop there. ITIs are going to be, because we conduct examination under the DGT, ITIs, we are going to put them under a vertical of an education board where the ITIs will have an equivalence of matriculation and higher secondary, and those 2 courses or the 2 more subjects which are required would be put in the
course curriculum of the ITI students so they don't have to wander around for a certification. We are going to do that. Now, what does this reflect? When we started, and it's just look at the thought process. I'm just talking about the policy side. I'm going to come back to other issue. Now, ITIs were under the Ministry of Labor. Labor is not a bad word. But labor, of course, is not very aspirational in our country. So the first time we migrated the ITIs or the DGT from the Ministry of Labor to so-called the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, and for the first time in this. So this is, you see, you all talk to all these people sitting in this audience, Professor. You talk to them. They would have heard about a professor of mathematics, professor of zoology, professor of economics, professor of geography, so forth and so forth. But in this country, you never heard of a professor of plumbing, never heard of a professor of carpentry, or if you never heard of a professor of painting, because these things are non-aspirational and they don't need to be given so much of respect. Maybe the nomenclature could have been different. I would not say plumbing or carpentry. There's nothing like this. This whole aspirational aspect for an individual became, because when we got independence, and this is again a very strong statement, when we got independence, because skills in India was there for thousands of years. It's not that we started talking about skills today. They have been existing. But the skills which were in a class of people which could have become the assets for this country, under the constitution framework, we put them under reservations. And as we put them under reservations, the whole aspirational aspect was reduced. And then we carried on with education. And I come from the state of Bihar. I do not know how many of you would have any reference to that state. But I have been in politics for 30 years. And when there is a board examination in Bihar, I have an office in my constituency, and when there is a board examination in Bihar, I find less number of people coming to my office for representations. So I ask and find out why. Or maybe when there is a secondary examination, I say, why? They say the board exams are on. So the entire family with a child moves out for the examination for the child. And everyone is so involved with the examination, because you may have seen certain viral videos which when people climb up to the third floor and etc., etc. I will not make them, will not explain it to them, and those who have understood should understand. This is not because they are to be blamed. They are not to be blamed because the system which we have created, they know jobs, government jobs, professionalism, recognition, including looking a bride and a bridegroom, is not with skills, but it is with degrees and qualifications. And with the whole ecosystem in this country, well, I will not refer, it could be partially true at some place, and when I'm talking in Gujarat, I have to be very careful, because I can't compare it, but I'm trying to talk about India today. And if you draw a line from on a map of India, unfortunately, historically, the wealth of the country is on the right side, and the poverty of this country is on the left side. If you look at Maharashtra, Gujarat, Karnataka, and go down. And if you look at Bihar, Jharkhand, Orissa, West Bengal, so this, you can see. And when you talk about India, when you talked about the integration of education, so I will split that into education and skills. And when you talk about connecting it with industry and the government, we are actually doing it in a very big way. But the problem is, when we have to put the ecosystem in place, this country is 1,272 million people. And when you look at this figure, we have 800 million active voters. You have 134 million voters. You see, what we are talking, I was recently, the Honorable Prime Minister asked me to visit a state in the Caribbean. So I was going there, I was very happy because there was a Prime Minister, there was a President, there was an Army Chief, there was a Navy Chief, there was a Cabinet, there was Parliament. And when I land up in this country called St. Lucia, the population of that country is 2,64,000 people. Other place where I visited is one of the most progressive countries in the African continent. And when I was in the aircraft, I saw that there was a 777 lined up at the airport for takeoff. There was a Dreamliner. So I thought this country must be big because there are Dreamliners coming here. And so when I went to the fact sheet of that country, It was one of the most progressive, and it had a prime minister, the president, it's a cabinet, a council of ministers, and so forth and so on. And the population of that country was 87,000 people, and that country is Seychelles. When you look at the size, because this entire ecosystem, what we are discussing today, should have been decided by the policy makers 67 years ago. When we talk about the National Skills Qualification Framework, I'm sure the entire audience, except for the officers who are looking into it, we have for the first time created the National Skills Qualification Framework, how to impart skills on the short term. So when we talk about short-term skilling, this short-term skilling does not exist anywhere in the world. But this is our reaction to the great demand created by the industry, because the industry says we do not have the workforce what we actually require. For those 1.8 million or say around 2 million engineering seats in this country, almost half of them are vacant now. Because we don't need engineers. Engineers do not know to pick up spanners or the pliers, or they do not know it. We want a manpower which is professional and it's hands-on. Now, when we look at the apprenticeship, which model which you're talking about Boeing, you're talking about all these companies they are. You require this manpower which is hands-on. They know the specific skills of a work. For us to understand the National Skills Qualification Framework, it's so much of a jumble, because for the first time this country is using a language of skills. We have never thought. And retrospectively, when I look back and I think what the Prime Minister has done for the first time is actually made the people in this country to understand what are skills. He had an experiment, a whole experiment in the state of Gujarat. He has carried that experiment to the Gujarat, and that is what he's trying to say, that let's do it this way. Let's try to do it. And look at the figures, what we talk about skilling in India. Look at the National Sample Survey Organization, which is an official document of Government of India, says, you look at USA, 55% plus skills. You look at UK, 68% of the workforce is skilled. You look at Germany, 74% of the workforce is. They say Korea, 96% of the workforce is skilled. But when you come back to talking about India and they look at the national samples, I do not know whether those figures are correct, the methodology of capturing it is correct or not, but they say we are just 3.5%. So if this is what we carry back, there is a flaw. Flaw in the process of training people, flaw in the process of the ecosystem which we created in 67 years, and the job to correct it. I always hear a statement कि 70 साल का हम लोगों का पूरा प्रयास धो दिया. Thank God we are cleaning off what you have done in 68 years. Thank God. Because 68 years we are still struggling to build up a language for skills. Is it not a disappointment? But nonetheless, nothing to get disappointed. We are moving on a very fast track. And the biggest challenge to me in the whole process was to create a language for skills which is understandable. If I have to look to Orissa, Bihar, Jharkhand, even we do not, we have about 1.6 lakhs, and plus another about 1.2 million vehicles coming. We do not have trained drivers. Now, Ola and Uber are two modern platforms, and they provide taxis. And a girl or a boy driving an Ola or an Uber in, say, Ahmedabad or maybe Delhi or Mangalore or Bangalore easily earns about 30 to 40,000 rupees. And tomorrow morning, Ola and Uber collectively require 3 lakh drivers from me. We do not have a formal drivers system to train them. And they don't need just drivers. They need someone who can understand the GPS, who can greet a customer, who can use the POS and make the bills for them. They want a driver which is a integrated capsule, that he can take care of all what is required as a customer. I'll tell you an example. Even English, if you can speak good English or French or German or Spanish, and you don't teach a child anything for next 10 years, 10 वर्षों तक किसी बच्चे को आप कुछ मत पढ़ाएं. आप सिर्फ उसको अंग्रेजी बोलना या फ्रेंच बोलना या जर्मन बोलना या स्पेनिश बोलना उसको 10 वर्षों तक आप सिखा दें. His employability would be much more than a graduate coming out of a college, and he will have an ensured employment. But the whole ecosystem where we are getting mixed up is that education, degree, certificate, qualification, convocation, and he's an important man. and that he needs to be treated important because that is aspirational. We have been going step by step and finding out. So we have created an ecosystem now. Now we are moving in that direction. And the ITIs, as far as ITIs are concerned, the engineering colleges are concerned, we have been struggling with the other ministries trying to create. I'm happy that Gujarat has created a skill mission, and the convergence which is actually taking place is a step forward. And other states need to emulate it. Other states need to go ahead with it. So going ahead with all these things, when we talk about, and let's keep it in mind, world over, a classroom training, a laboratory training is not good enough to make you employable. World over, the training which actually takes place in a shop floor. He has to move to a shop floor, which we call an apprentice, and from there he moves to be integrated in the system. And 67 years down the line, the number of apprentices which we have in this country is just 3 lakh children going out from these institutes to become apprentice. A country like China, it's not fair to compare. China has about 2 crore apprentices getting into the system every year, with just about 200 billion more population than us. Japan has about 1 crore apprentices. They move straight. They straight move it to the industry. They incentivize the industry. So the process of training will never take place as long as you keep them back in the classroom. They have to move to the industry. They have to go to the shop floor. And that's why most of us, the industry doesn't know that Prime Minister, we recently launched the maps. I started with a ministry with maybe 200 crores rupees to begin with. The focus of the Prime Minister that we have to bring uniformity in the skill system, the language of skill, the verticals of the skills have to be defined, international integration, standardizing it to the international levels, where certification at international level, when you train an X or a Y, that standard qualification is valid across the world. We have been doing it in piecemeals, signing MOUs with Japan, Switzerland, Sweden, so forth and so on, Australia, Canada, so that boys who get trained under those metrics can absolutely move out once. But even if you have to go at the lower level, I'm not talking about high-end industrial skills. Occasionally we get an opportunity to go on the cruises across the world. So if there's a huge ship which has 5,000 people on board, out of these 5,000 people who are on the cruise liners, 3,000 would be the passengers and 2,000 people would be there to help those or look after those. And if I get into the queue and ask, if I interview, say, 10 children, or an average or on a percentage of 100, out of 100 child who goes to work, 95 would be from Philippines, from Malaysia, from Thailand, and out of this 100, 5 would be from India or Pakistan. It's amazing. We can't have people who can be security assistants, back checkers, safety drivers, and so forth and so on. We are absolutely not got the ecosystem correct. The world has a huge demand. A plumber who may be trained, we do not have a formal recognition of a plumber in this country. The painters who make these rooms, or the carpenters, we don't have a formal training. We don't have a formal setup. And these are the short-term skills which need to be put into the system, where the entry-level jobs are required in huge numbers. We actually have huge demand for entry-level jobs, but we are not training, and that is what the industry is cribbing about. That we want workers, and you find a pathway for them, they'll move out. They'll find a pathway for themselves, and I've seen this happening. I always tell about an example, and the Peruvian ambassador was very upset with me because the ambassador, the ambassador in Peru wrote to us, said that why do we need to issue visas for truck operators who have to go and work in Jaipur and Udaipur? We do not have people who can operate these jumbo trucks, these Hydra trucks, these long haul blasters, and I do not know how many things which are there. They came all the way from 18,000 kilometers to operate these trucks and train boys here. India with the population, we can't do this. But nonetheless, this all has been identified now. We are moving in that direction. We are trying to fix up those weak spots and linkages. We are trying to build up a connect with the industry. We are also trying to move skills till the time skill becomes aspirational to merge into education. We have moved it out on a different track so that both go parallelly till this aspirational aspect of skills is established. And that is the biggest challenge, to make it dignified, to make it aspirational, and we are moving in that direction. And I'm sure in times to come, because Make in India has to happen. It's happening in Gujarat, it's in Raipur, but Make in India will not happen unless until you have makers in India, and our job is to create makers in India. Thank you very much.